Hello everybody, good afternoon. I'm from Belgium. My name is Pletinckx, and I have a presentation on heritage, on digital heritage. And we are a company which is active in digital heritage. We are let's say, in the center of Belgium, not so far from Brussels. We work, in fact, on a European scale. And we are a kind of innovation company. So we do new developments, new projects, new types of interaction, etc. for heritage, for digital heritage. We are active in commercial projects, but also in European projects. We are focused, in fact, on three things. We are focused on creation of digital heritage, of 3D digital heritage, which is mostly virtual reconstruction and digital restoration. That is what we focus on a European scale. And also we focus on the interaction with that 3D digital heritage. And we also connect interactive storytelling to that. We do that in different European projects, but we also, as I said, do that in projects that we get as a commercial activity from museums, from cities, etc. But we also do project development. So we also create new projects. And at the end of my talk, I will also talk about that briefly if people are interested. I'm myself an ICT specialist. I'm a civil engineer ICT. I'm already working in this for 20 years. And so in this way, in fact, we try to be really innovative in these kind of things we do. Basically, why do museums and why does, let's say, cultural heritage needs 3D? In fact, because it opens up a lot of the possibilities. It's not only digitizing, like you just have seen, but it's also recreation not only of objects, but also of sites, of landscapes, being in the past, restore digital museum objects, because most objects that are in a museum are damaged, incomplete, out of their context, etc. So that is what we try to fill in, and that is what works very well within 3D, and what, in fact, there is no equivalent really to solve that in another way. And so in this way, we link, in fact, in a museum, also the outer world. We bring, let's say, the archaeological site in the museum if you show archaeological objects. We provide, in fact, the historical evolution of things and so on. And that is important, I think, for a lot of people, and you're all graphical people, I think, very visual people here in the room. And that is because a lot of people have, 2 people out of 3, and it comes from research, have no historical horizon, like they call it, going beyond their grandparents. That means if you give people, 2 people out of 3, an object from the 17th century or some from the 12th century, they don't know the difference. So what we do, in fact, if we make reconstruction, we in fact give them a visual reference. We show them how a Roman town looks like. We show them how a medieval village looks like. And that is something that is much more getting in your mind, staying in your mind, than all the theory and all the numbers that you can get in a lot of museums. And you know, a lot of museums have these audio phones that overwhelm you with a massive amount of facts. That's not, in fact, the kind of thing we want to do. We want to work very visually, very interactively. So, what has Blender to do with that? Blender is our 3D main engine, in fact. We do everything in Blender in terms of creation of 3D. Of course, we use other programs for specific other things. For example, for the creation, sometimes we use 3D digitization, like you have seen from different photographs. We use Agisoft, for example, for that. We do 3D sculpting. We do that in Blender, or sometimes we do that in ZBrush. So these kind of things we do. We do landscape reconstruction. We use Vue for that, and also Unity. You will see in a minute. And the other thing we do, in fact, is how to interact with 3D. And there, in fact, we use Kinect cameras. We use a leap sensor, the leap motion sensor, And we do that all in Unity. So we make use of the link, the very good link, in fact, between Blender and Unity. And the third thing we do, in fact, is we work a lot with 3D prints. We 3D print an object and we make it interactive. It becomes a completely interactive object. I will show you in a minute. So let me give you an example. This site we already work for more than 20 years. This is a site that, in fact, we learn a lot. This is our lab. Our office is also there. But it's also one of the most major heritage sites in terms of digital heritage in Belgium. So we are lucky, in fact, to have this kind of archaeological site together with the museum and together with the visitor center that you see here on the picture, just at 300 meters from our door. So that is, in fact, our outdoor lab that we use. It's a very nice, beautiful site at the river Schelde, Escaut. And this is the kind of reconstructions that we make. Let me just give you an idea what we talk about. This is 1,000 years of reconstruction that you have seen pass by, right? This is 20 years of excavations. This is a lot of work to make this kind of reconstruction in 3D, in fact in 4D, in time and in 3D. And we not only use archaeology, we use, for example, also, scanning. This is resistivity measurement, all kinds of techniques that give you then an idea what is in the underground, also of the parts that are not scanned, and with several techniques, and gives us then parts that we reconstruct, for example, from the year 1000, of which there are not so many traces anymore, and that we have used, for example, last year in a large international exhibition, which is today still even shown in Prague, with animations, etc. All what you see is all modeled in Blender and or rendered in Vue or made in real-time animation in Unity. Gives you an idea. A lot of these things that you see is not just modeling, and there is a lot of research going, for example, in all the objects in what you see here before we even start modeling. And the boat, for example, that you see here is in the Utrecht Museum. We go through all the studies, we go through all the descriptions of that, analysis of that, and then we start building it in 3D. Okay. I was talking about landscape reconstruction. That's one of the things we do, and I think we're one of the, in Europe, one of the major partners in landscape reconstruction. And to show you a bit the collaboration, let's say, between Blender and other softwares, I wanted to show this as a kind of case. And landscape, in fact, is something that is very organic, that, in fact, you need to do procedural. And what we do, first of all, is we have a kind of conceptual model, reconstruction, a certain period, certain time, we reconstruct everything in conceptually. And from that, in fact, we make what we call terrain maps. And we make not only the height maps, but also the kind of maps with different types of terrain. So, for example, this is what you see in black is the terrain which is grazed by animals. So that you have a certain vegetation in that. And that typical vegetation then, in fact, is differentiated from other terrains, so it has another look. We also make the height maps, which we do, in fact, in TIFF images, in 16-bit TIFF images. So we have, here it's a very flat terrain, but we have everything in terrain maps, because sometimes terrain maps we need to edit. We need to remove things which are from recent times and bring it back to the original terrain, how it was in a certain period. And in fact, that gives us this. So the colors just depict the different types of terrain, and with already the height map applied, and that type of terrain, each type of terrain has its own vegetation, with plants, with distribution of plants, etc. And so that looks like this, right? So that is what Vue, in fact, does for us. You know Vue? Who knows Vue here? A few people, yeah? Vue has been used in Avatar, for example, but it's used in several films. But I think it is also very useful software for us for doing this kind of historical reconstruction. The only thing we have to do is struggle with a lot of bugs, but okay, that's the way life is. And okay, when we get something like this from the definition of terrain types, etc., we just put in the objects, and there you go. You have a reconstruction in 3D, very high resolution, very viewable from all points of view. We have done that, like you have seen in the beginning, for all the different periods, for example, of this site. We have done that for many other sites also. Just use this as an example. And so in this way, we can really walk through the terrain and have a good idea how it would look like in a certain period. Now, the thing is not that we use, in fact, this kind of historical reconstruction. The thing is that if we do cultural heritage, it's no fiction. It is reality. The only thing is that reality is gone in most cases, but it's reality. So that means, in fact, that we want really to document also. If we say, okay, we think this reality looked like this, we need to document that. We work with specialists. We just not invent these things. We really work with a lot of specialists on landscape, on archaeology, etc., bring all this knowledge together, and also let what we can create validate by these people, right? There's a whole cycle which is different than the typical, let's say, games or whatever virtual reality workflow that you normally have. So that means also that we, from the documentation we derive from this process of landscape reconstruction, we have another added advantage, and that is, in fact, that this documentation also is used to make real-time version of this. And that is what we do. We use, in fact, a plugin from a developer here in Amsterdam, I believe, for Unity. It's a plugin in Unity. And that turns our maps that we use in Vue, turns those maps also in real-time visualization in very highly optimized level of detail kind of 3D, which this is the interface, won't bother you with that. These are the results. This is complete, very optimized, 2 by 2 kilometer reconstruction that we made, for example, for one period here, and completely animated with weather systems, etc., etc. And that gives you an idea. This is the kind of thing we completely make in 3D, real-time, available on a pretty normal PC. I'll show you in a minute. The other thing, of course, we had to do when we did this kind of real-time reconstruction was not only do the landscape, but also, for example, do the interiors. And in the interiors, we not only wanted to have the reconstruction of the abbey scientifically correct. Again, we start from building techniques, medieval building techniques, how it was built, etc. There is a lot of research going in these things. And then, of course, you have the site itself with all the data that you have, with all the objects which are still there, with how the site looks today, and how this then is turned into the 3D model. This is the Blender model, and this is then the Unity model, the Unity visualization that you see in the game. Same, for example, for these parts, which are pretty badly recognizable, let's say, when you are on the train. This is how it looks in the reconstruction, and this is the space on the other side of the wall and next to it, and that is how it looks then in the game, in the real-time game. Same here, scriptorium. We spend a lot of effort also on putting in the objects. Of course, these objects are not there anymore. They're not excavated, not always excavated, but that means also that we make a functional analysis. What is this room doing? How are people working in this room? What do they need? And so on. We put all the objects in there, and then you get a complete working room where people in the educational game that we have made, but also in a virtual walkthrough with guides, I will explain in a minute, can use to show, for example, how such an abbey worked. If they were making books in a scriptorium, how does that work? What do you need, etc., etc. Same here, this is a part of the site. This is the reconstruction. This is the visualization. I think you get the picture. And some parts are really difficult on the site to understand. For example, this is completely invisible in that period that we can reconstruct, and one wall is not preserved even, so it looks like this. It's very difficult to read on the terrain. So reconstruction is very useful, and that's also what we do with the guides I will show in a minute. The guides, in fact, show the virtual reconstruction and then go on the terrain and say, here you're now standing in this. Everybody closes his eyes and sees, in fact, the virtual reconstruction and knows what it's looking a lot. Gives you an idea, okay? Same for the objects, and there are objects which are excavated and which are in the museum. And so we link all these objects really, we put them on the table, we reconstruct them, like you, if you only have this, well, we reconstruct the whole thing, scientifically correct, and then put it on the table. Same for books, you have the book, this is a 3D, this is the real book, lock, that is in the museum, etc. So we use that all for what we call natural interaction. So let me briefly go with a small overview of what we do in natural interaction before I will come back then to this educational game. So we do different types of natural interaction. Of course, we use touchscreens. Everybody knows that. We use object VR, these kind of things. I will not talk about that. But I wanted to talk something about tangible interfaces. A lot of people in a museum, touchscreens, I don't think that's the right way to go. In certain cases, it is a cost-effective way to go, but it's not always the most appealing way to go. So what we do is, in fact, we print 3D objects and we make them completely interactive. Let me show you that, how we do that. There's a project we did last year based on an earlier prototype we will redo in a couple of weeks from now. But we have this, last year was the year of Augustus, and it was 2,000 years ago that he died. So we did something about Emperor Augustus and the Roman Emperor. And this is one of his statues, and the most famous, I think, which is in the Vatican Museum. So we had a 3D scan from our colleagues in America, and we got that 3D scan completely assembled in different pieces. And we also designed all the interior of that, because there is electronics going inside. Electronics because we want to make this an interactive object. Interactive. Maybe you have seen, the link is on my talk. If you want to see, just click on the link, which is in the description of my talk. I have not the time here to show it. But it shows, in fact, when you move the object that you have in your hand, this is the object and you have it in your hand, you see it moving on the screen. But this is just a white plastic object. You see the real object moving on the screen. And when you touch a certain part, then it interacts and it shows you more story, more background, more information, etc. That's, in fact, the concept of this thing. And so it uses the orientation sensor inside. It uses, of course, it needs a battery because it's completely wireless. But it uses an orientation sensor. And that is something we are now also redesigning to do this in Arduino to make it cheaper, because we started, in fact, from more expensive sensors, and now we want to make this a bit more less expensive. And then, in fact, it's like this standing in a museum. It's the object there, you pick it up, and you can move it and touch it. Look at the video, there is a nice video about that, and then you will see how it works. We did several implementations of that, where you just have the object, you just pick it up, and it's an interactive storytelling device. So you kind of say, I have an emperor here, why is he on bare foot? And you push the button, and it tells you the story, right? So that's the way it works. We did that also for buildings, where we had, this is a building in Rome. Again, Augustus, has links with Augustus, won't bother you with the details, but we made a 3D model of that, we printed that in 3D, and we made it interactive. If you look on the other side, it's full of electronics. It's no big deal. It's just interfacing push buttons to what's a USB interface. Okay. And so you push the button, tells you the story. It's a storytelling device. And it's like this in the museum. You see here the interactive model, and you see here a plaster cast of the real object. One of the panels of the real object is there as a plaster cast in a museum. That's the way it works. We do other things like with leap sensor, for example, just pointing at an object. You see here, you point at the object and you see the color appearing on the object, the color that disappeared. Like here also. So this is the object like it is in the museum, and this is the object, how you see it in fact, how specialists think it was colored and how it was used in fact, and you make that appear by just pointing with your finger, and the leap sensor does the trick. This is another implementation with wall paintings that we have used in Rome. This is an implementation in Egypt, in Alexandria, where we have from this statue, which has been in the sea for about 2,000 years, very eroded and so on, this is the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. There's the big glamour couple of the year 2,000 years ago. And in fact, we took both of them, the most reliable portraits that they had, and we gave a 3D artist, in fact, the task to do a digital restoration with sculpting, digital sculpting, starting from the real model and then giving, in fact, all the details that are disappeared. And even coming up with some hypotheses. You see that there are these strange holes here. We came up with hypotheses how this was. Won't bother you with the details, but these are the results which are then projected on the real statue in the museum. Like this. Okay. Same with natural interaction. We started with a project 5 years ago on Etruscan culture. This is a grave with the objects here in the Vatican Museum. This is the real grave, and we combined it all, reconstructed that. You could walk through the grave, completely explore it. But the walking through happens with natural interaction. So we started with something very simple, which was walking on a map. And then we evolved to really working with gestures that you take objects, indicate, go in the menu, etc. This is a permanent installation in the Vatican Museum. Other people have done the same. This is a permanent installation, or at least a test for a permanent installation in a museum in Finland. This is Bologna in 3D, that you even can fly over. Children love to do that. We did last year 11 of these virtual environments in 4 museums all over Europe. This is in Sarajevo. And let me show you how we further developed that in this site in Ename, and also based on one of the top objects of our museum in Ename. Here, it's an ivory object, 6.5 centimeters wide, not only this big. And so we made an editor, a gesture editor, where in fact you play your gestures to say, I want that this kind of gesture does something, right? And you record that, and then you can edit that. Won't bother you with all the details. We had a story linked to that through this reconstruction, both outside and inside. And that story then all came together in 2 things, in fact. So we have this visitor center on the site, and that overlooks the site itself. And from there, in fact, we have what we call virtual walks. So a guide really takes a whole group through a virtual walk through the whole village and the whole abbey, but also for children, for schools, so that they play this as an educational game. There's a whole story in there, there's a whole plot in it, and so they play it really interactively with the whole group, one by one, of course, but that's the way it goes. So that is now started. If you're in Belgium, if you're in Ename, come along. I will put the PDF of my presentation also. I think it will be put online, I guess. And so the link is there. Just have a look at it. And let me now play the video. Yes. What you see? Yeah. Okay. So this shows how it practically works. Bye. just music doesn't do much. This is the site of Ename. This is how the archaeology looks like. Huh? And you see the visitor center there, and from top floor there, that's the view you have on the archaeological site. And in fact, like here with a guide and with users, with children, they play the virtual reconstruction. Huh? And then they walk through it just through gestures. Go forward. Huh? But also take objects, look at things. This is how it looks like. Huh? If you play it as a game, it's over an hour. In content, which is in there, is a 2x2 kilometer reconstruction. We have tested it out with a number of people now, even with handicapped people, even with people in wheelchairs and so on, so it all works. So these people just by gestures immediately get the point, and this is a handicapped person also that you just have seen. Huh? He grabs the coin, and you can look from all sides to the coin. There is a story behind it, and etc. So that's the way it goes. Everything what you see is modeled in Blender, and then interactivity happens in Unity. For example, this is what we do. We bring a lot of objects out of the museum. The book comes from Leiden. Other objects come from the museum, so we all bring it together here in the environment where they come from. Of course, to do things like that, we do digital restoration. For example, this parchment is digitally restored. The original the parchment like we have it today is badly damaged. So you cannot just read it like that. We did digital restoration on it. Gives you a bit. This was Open Monuments Day, so there was a lot of people there. But that's also a bit the scenery, how the guides work with a group, in fact, and do a virtual tour like this. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Sorry for the questions, but feel free to ask.
Yes? Operate in this doing a project in Flanders, Wallonia, France. Okay, good.
For the one location that has the window.
Sorry.
Your Mac, HDMI?
Yes. Should be.
It's on this side, right?
Yes. Let me just open it. So.
If I would show you what we make,
Yeah, we're a bit late, but if you can...
This side. Try to keep it short.
You're from Switzerland? I see this was not?
This is Lausanne, yes.
Okay, let's... No, I'm from Lausanne. Was it?
Are you? Okay. Yeah, I used to work there. I don't live there anymore, but it's still in my heart.